So I had started talking to you about something right before I hit record. We stopped talking because we realized we were getting on to something. I sent you a TikTok from C-SPAN last night where Rand Paul was arguing with Marco Rubio about what the definition of a war is. Now, I am in favor of Rand Paul's argument on this because I think he made some really good points. The Cliff Notes version of this clip was Marco Rubio is apparently being grilled in front of the Senate about what happened in Venezuela. And Rand Paul is arguing that the definition of a war matters because the Trump administration is basically saying this wasn't a war. We didn't need to alert Congress. That's why we did it. And fair. I mean, it was a quick in and out, nab and grab. Rand Paul's argument was if somebody did this to us, we would absolutely consider it a war. If somebody attacked the U.S., bombed the Capitol, kidnapped the president, we would absolutely declare it a war. It also is where does it spilling over matter as far as the definition goes? If they start fighting back and we get drawn in, now, it's kind of an undeclared war, and Congress didn't have a say. So I watched the whole thing. I don't know if you watched the whole thing. I did send it to you at like 4 o'clock in the morning, so hopefully you got to enjoy it with a cup of coffee.
I've seen some of the bits of argument. I mean, Marco Rubio is kind of like trying to pitch it with the administration talking points of it was a law enforcement operation. I don't necessarily buy that. We that's kind of some, if you want to go to the earlier talking points about China having secret police stations in the United States and all around the Western world. It's kind of us doing the same thing, but just kicking down the front door and saying, police, everybody freeze in another country with our military.
And so I understand the argument that, we declared Maduro a criminal. I get that. I've made my feelings clear. I think that this was
a military operation. Just hold your ground. Like, we did that.
Yeah, but what if they had fought back? What if they had fired missiles at U.S. boats or what have you? At what point is
then it becomes a military operation?
Okay, but how long? How long is a military operation allowed to go on until it's a war? He had brought up Vietnam. He said, what number do you feel is the number of American deaths and the number of years we need to be involved in something before it's classified as a war? Was Vietnam a war?
But I mean, but didn't we do that to Iran in, what was that, 89 when we took out their entire navy in less than 24 hours? Or we didn't call that a war?
I mean, but I think that this is a larger topic. He brings up at the end of that clip, he says something like, we've been doing this wrong for 70 years. I'm inclined to agree with him.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. It's just, if we've been doing it like this for 70 years, I mean, I get his perspective. He's allowed his opinion, and he's a senator. He should have his opinion. But, I mean, that's the thing. We've been doing it for 70 years. There's a precedent to it. Every administration since the end of World War II has just been like, yeah, well, you know what? We're the world's policemen. We're going to conduct military operations where we please, as we please. And, who has kind of stopped us from doing it? It's a condition of being the world's superpower and hegemon, right? Is you're going to throw your weight around. You're wherever your interests may lie, you're going to intervene however you choose to, economically, diplomatically, or militarily.
No, I agree.
It's just a condition of the fact, right? Of being the world superpower.
Well, it's like the whole argument you'll see is we violated international law,
we
by
wrote those international laws, did we not?
Well, okay. Well, just because we wrote something doesn't mean we're allowed to violate it.
True.
The government wrote the Constitution saying they can't execute you at will. That doesn't mean they're allowed to because they wrote it.
But they do.
But my argument is more like the point I'm getting at is, I get that it's illegal, but I mean, legality is only as it is. How enforceable is it? Like morally, I'm 100% on the side of people who say this was illegal and we shouldn't have done it and it's a violation of international law, blah blah blah. I'm 100% on your side. At the same time, if you can't enforce that law, then it's not not that it's not important, but it's what's the point? You know, if the U.S. is the ones enforcing the law, if the U.S. is the ones with the military power to do so, and now they decide to go rogue, and you have no way of stopping them, well, that's kind of on you for letting them get in that position. You know,
Yeah.
especially for the Europeans that are complaining, it's like, well, you shouldn't have relied on us for 80 years expecting that we would never become the bad guy. Not that saying we are the bad guy or whatever, but to circle this back, I think it's more in the context of is this a war? Doing these military operations just because we've had precedent on it and we've done it for 70 years doesn't mean that we've been doing it wrong for 70 years. We should just keep doing it wrong.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it, but I'm gonna kind of go with my previous argument is like, you know, China, their last military, operation war was Vietnam, right? In what, 79? The Soviet Union did it to Afghanistan in the, what, I think late 70s, early 80s. Kind of as a superpower, there's always been this, precedent to, in your area of, your hemisphere of interest and influence, you're going to kind of do as you please. I get it, international laws and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, who's going to stop the big guys from doing it? Now, they could hold each other accountable, and certainly we did that by, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we supplied them weapons. That came back to bite us in the ass, provided them training. They did it to us. There are reports that, they were funneling the Taliban weapons and shit from and when we invaded Afghanistan, and them influencing Iran to supply, terrorist organizations all around the Middle East to fight the United States when we were over there for 20 years. So, I think that's the enforcement, or one of those mechanisms of like, the big guys are going to kind of do what they want to do outside of the international norms and international laws. They'll just, our interests were at stake and national defense, but they can kind of check each other and hold each other, but through proxy wars.
Well,
people may not like that, but at the end of the day, it's happened.
I mean,
it continues to happen.
I agree. I think it's more the point of that I was getting at originally was in that video. Congress still. I get that there is an argument to be made that like the president should be able to act a little quicker. Congress can slow things down and whatnot. But if this had spun out of control, hypothetically, Congress should have a say for that reason. Okay, well, if say Venezuela had fought back and say some U.S. servicemen had died, and say obviously Venezuela is not going to be able to take us on, but let's say it gotten bogged down. I think he even talks about we're still spending money blockading Venezuela. We still haven't ruled out sending more soldiers back and putting boots on the ground if things go sideways. He's like, well, Congress didn't have a say in any of that. If you are invading a country, then blockading them, and then threatening to basically put your troops on the ground and more or less rule them by proxy and have martial law with your soldier. At what point is it a war? It is important that we discuss that and going forward in the future, because I would agree with Rand Paul on this that we've done it wrong for 70 years. I mean, I think we've discussed this before that you agree.
Let me make another argument is the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Did Congress give JFK permission to enforce an embargo around Cuba and potentially take us into a nuclear war? No, he acted on his authority. There's a threat within the region, and it almost killed the entire world. But at the end of the day, he did it without congressional approval. And I mean, it worked out for us, right? But did anybody complain about that? Did anybody in Congress say, hey, you're the bad guy. Did you have the authority to do so?
Well, I
I'm
think
just,
I think they should have. I think
they should have, but
like this is part of that problem we've talked about before, that Congress has slowly neutered itself for the past
well,
century.
yeah, I was going to say that if we, at the end of the day, if we truly want to have a discussion about it, why don't we talk about rescinding the War Powers Act? Why
Well,
don't we have a convert?
I think we need to rescind a bunch of things that Congress needs to take back. And I think there's just also there's modern day problems that were never thought possible 100 years ago. No
Yeah,
one even 50 years ago really was talking about the threat of hypersonic missiles, and should the president be able to, when seconds matter in an international crisis, does the president have time to call Congress and be like, "Hey, we think Russia's about to launch hypersonic missiles at us. I need your permission to attack first," So
yeah,
I think part of the larger problem here is that the 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 America was set up in a way that it was supposed to evolve over time, and it had steadily done that until, I don't know, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. The problem is that Congress got lazy. Congress decided to pawn a bunch of its responsibilities off on the president, and then they've never kept up with the times. The
yeah. They never took.
governments
Maybe they passed those on special occasions, but never set a timeline.
of, hey, you're only allowed to do this in these circumstances for this set amount of time before getting back
Or
to
yeah,
us.
or like the military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq and um, going after terrorists in the Middle East. It was always like, oh well, yeah, we're doing this to fight the terrorists. We never put a timeline to it.
Well, we
Put,
never put
hey,
any
these are the conditions for it, these stipulations, and we ended up being there for 20 some years.
well, not just there. We didn't put stipulations on any of it. Think about how many other countries we struck outside of that area.
Yeah,
I mean the recent the recent strikes on Nigeria that Trump did. Those were basically just an expanded part of that. It's like there
yeah,
was never any, hey, you can only hit these countries for this amount of time. We need to review this every so many days or so many months.
no. And I'm not arguing against. I'm not saying he's wrong on this. I'm just saying, hey, there's perspective to this. There's precedent to this. Sure, you can be angry about it now, but yeah, I guess he does bring it up. We've been doing it like this for 70 years, but it's like, okay, well, you're kind of part of the problem. Why don't you bring up a bill?
Well, in
Why
his
don't you
defense, I'm pretty
sponsor a
sure
bill?
I think he did sponsor that War Powers one recently that got
Did it?
voted down.
Maybe it
But well,
wasn't.
the problem is just the politics in general. Is neither side wants to limit it because it benefits both of them.
Yes,
They
and they don't want the blame for if there ever is an incident, international incident, and the president can't act, and the political ramifications of that is like, well, you tied my hands behind my back. I couldn't do anything.
well
This is
that's a good point.
Party
Actually,
A's fault. You know?
that's a good point as well, because it's not even just the fact that Congress is lazy and doesn't want to do their job. They don't want to take any of the risks when things go sideways. You
Yeah,
know,
this is part of that uniparty problem. Is at the end of the day, like you mentioned, both parties can use it as a benefit. They don't want to take it. Is beneficial to both parties at the end of the day,
oh,
whether as a talking point or a point of when they're in control, a point of operation.
well, and to that point, it's like when Obama was striking people in the Middle East, the Democrats were fine with it. They weren't crying War Powers Act. They weren't, you know, when Obama was attacking targets outside of Iraq and Afghanistan, when he was striking targets in Libya and Syria and Pakistan, no one was like, "Oh, hey, Obama, maybe we want to circle back on that real quick." No, they were just fine with it. Keep in mind, the Republicans were fine with it too, because they're constantly about foreign interventions. They're the war hawks. I mean, like
Yeah,
when Lindsey Graham was foaming at the mouth next to Trump when they were talking about Cuba. It's like, the Republicans. I'll give them a little more flack on that for
oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm curious if he had an opinion about us parking an aircraft carrier strike group next to Yemen when they were shooting missiles at boats. You know,
Who,
I don't
Rand
know.
Paul?
Yeah,
I don't recall anything off the top of my head, like specifically, but I Rand Paul has been pretty consistent over the years. I'm sure he vocalized,
I'm
whether,
opposition to it,
yeah, he's pretty against
which I would agree
foreign
with him. You
intervention.
know, there's no reason why we should have been in that theater of operations. The Europeans should have taken that over themselves.
Well, there's no reason we should have been into it to the extent that we were. I mean, we've talked about that on a
Yeah,
previous episode, that should have been more of Europe's heavy lifting over,
yeah. Rather
us.
than 3% of American trade being affected. You know,
And we've got to send in, 98% of the forces over there to do the dirty work. Again, circling back to my hatred of when Europeans love to cry that America gets involved in everybody's business, but then the moment shit goes sideways, they're like, "America, save us! What are you doing? Why are you still hanging out back in the Western Hemisphere? We need you
yeah.
over here."
They're shooting at our ships. We don't have the capacity to shoot back. Oh my.
I think something like that as well. I'm curious. This is where I'm not educated enough in, you know, international treaties and things like that. I'm curious. I would imagine something like that would have been covered underneath like some NATO charter or one of our alliances of like, hey, we don't need Congress by letting us join NATO has already given us approval to go ahead of time and do something like that. I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, you know what? During that Yemen incident, we should have said, okay, if you want our help, Article 5.
Oh, that's fair. I mean, that is a
You
counter
know,
a good
they,
counter
they,
argument.
they like to say, they came to our defense after 9/11, which they did, but at the same time, why haven't you used it? Oh yeah, because we're already there taking care of your problems without you needing to, declare something like that.
If
Like
we're,
in that
if we're
Yemen
not over
incident.
there for Israel, we're over there for the Europeans.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually an interesting thing too. You were talking about earlier, and I sent you a video recently about all the assets were moving in the direction of Iran. Again, kind of in the same vein, Congress hasn't, you know, had a say. It seems like we are on a collision course to strike Iran. Whether or not we do is still to be
Yeah,
decided.
probably I would say within the next month, as many like assets as we're moving, it definitely looks like something. Sure, it could be like, hey, let's make them blink, but that's a whole lot of military movement. That's a whole lot of money to make them come to the table.
Well, and again, this kind of goes into the whole thing of like what constitutes a war and why it's important to define this because hypothetically, it's not going to happen, but hypothetically, let's say, Russia and China have very close ties to Iran. We've already, kind of yoinked Venezuela away from them. Let's say they hypothetically were like, hey, if the United States strikes Iran, we're going to get involved in defense of Iran. At what point is it like, okay, well, that would be a war? Like, Congress should probably have a say if we're going to potentially drag other international entities into this. So, again, I think these are important conversations that Congress should have been having for years and years and years. Because if that does go sideways, I mean, that could very easily go sideways. If I'm China or Russia and I'm looking at this and I already see what's happened to Venezuela, we pretty much lost them. Iran is a big producer of oil, is a big producer of weapons. I might be looking and going, hey, maybe I'm going to station some peacekeeping forces in the region or something. Maybe not Russia.
Yeah,
They're guys that are
I don't.
dying in Ukraine, but
The thing is China might be building up militarily, but they yet to have a blue water navy. They're getting there. They may have the largest navy by hull count, but they don't have the capacity for a blue water navy just yet. A lot of their aircraft carriers are still running on fuel oil rather than nuclear. They're not going to move military assets to the area, but
no, and I would agree. I don't think it's likely, but it's still like the premise of at what point is it like, hey, we need to take this power back from the president because I've
yeah,
never been in favor of one man should have that decision making
yeah, that doesn't
capabilities.
stop him from moving military assets in the
No,
region.
no,
By all means,
absolutely
he's the
not.
commander in chief, and he must always have the capacity to act. whether it's in self-defense or if Congress does give permission, we should still have, military assets in the area, you know. But yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's, if he does act on Iran, is it under what condition? Is it the same one that used to bomb them over, last year and take out their nuclear sites? Is sure we can all say that that's good that they did that. We don't want them having nuclear weapons, but under what permissions? At the end of the day, there was kind of no direct threat to the United States. There was a direct threat to Israel,
Yeah.
but
Well, I'm
they kind of started it. So,
I don't think this,
yeah.
as much as I like to blame Israel for our foreign entanglements, I don't think this would necessarily be on them. I think this is much more, the Iran situation is much more in the same vein as Venezuela. I think, you've brought up before that we're kind of gearing up to a potential conflict with China. We're kind of dealing, we've been geared up for a potential conflict with Russia. I think this is just another pawn being moved on the board of let's isolate as many of the pull as many of the weaker forces out of the equation as possible.
Yeah, I do believe, whether there's that, uh, Chinese plan for invading Taiwan in 2027. Do I want to say the Trump administration is playing chess here? Like, take out these pawns, take out the Venezuela, take out the Iran, really kind of take out these smaller axis powers. That way, in a conflict with China, they can't rely on these people can't stir stuff up in these regions, and we could focus full force on the Pacific region. I'd like to think that's what they're doing behind the scenes. Do they give me a lot of confidence? Sometimes not with their rhetoric and some of the dumb stuff they do, but I'd like to say that's what they're doing.
I think that's
Like,
what this is for sure.
yeah.
I think now, I think and again, in the same vein, he's already talked about he might strike targets in Mexico. He might strike targets in Colombia. There's also been talks, again, I said a moment ago, about Lindsey Graham foaming at the mouth over the thought of us invading Cuba or striking that. Huge risk to America's national security, a country that is.
I mean, China does have a spy base in Cuba. They took over the former Soviet Union spy base in the middle of Cuba, and it's sitting 90 miles off our coastline, and there are a lot of kind of naval secret programs in, I think, the Keys.
I'm more
So
concerned with them buying up farmland around U.S. military bases.
yeah, especially from that Ukrainian operation that we've seen 2-3 years ago, where the drones went out and took out most of their strategic bombers, the Russian strategic bombers.
I think that was just a little over a year ago. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like that is some national security stuff that we should be thinking about. And think about it. China creates most of the world's advanced drones, and a good sneak attack like that could cripple us.
Well,
especially
did you see
especially
also,
if they take out F-22s and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Did you see also? I didn't know this until like a week ago. So with all the Greenland rhetoric we've been having, China operates a uranium mine in Greenland. Did you know
Really?
that? Yeah. So
I did not know that.
So China is apparently the Danes and the Greenlanders had negotiated. It's not just a uranium mine. I think they've got another mine up there for something, and they are, I guess I forget. I would have to look up the article, but it was something like they were buying up ports in Greenland as well. So, again, to the international chess game that's being played, as far as Greenland now being a piece on that board, I found that interesting. I'm kind of surprised that's not being talked about more. Now, I don't know the process with turning uranium into, I know there's different requirements for it being energy versus weapon based. I don't know if just any uranium harvested can be made into that sort of thing, but
I think
I think it's just a refinement.
Apologize for butchering this. Shenhe Resources involvement. The Chinese firm is the second largest shareholder in the controversial something mine. I'm not going to say it because I'm going to butcher it. which is currently halted by a 2021 ban causing legal disputes.
Okay, so that's not active yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm. I mean, maybe a little bit of pressure from the United States. That
Well,
definitely
I
would have been what, the Biden administration.
yeah. Well, I think like that's curious in and of itself because if I'm any president in America, you know, Democrat or Republican, the moment I find out that hey, you're letting the Chinese mine uranium out of a NATO territory, knowing that there's a potential war on the horizon between a NATO member and China, what are we doing, guys? What are we doing? You know, you talk about we're this giant security collective, but you're actively undermining that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think that mine is like, I just seen it. It's like the third largest known deposit of, I think, rare earths or uranium.
Okay, that might have been the second mine I was thinking about, or maybe it's all just one big mine of uranium and rare earth.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
yeah,
mean,
go on.
I think that's something both, again, I'll say it. I don't want to say it, but I have to say it. Trump derangement syndrome is, people see he does it to himself, especially the whole going on about annexing them and saying it's going to be U.S. territory. Maybe not the best PR campaign, but at the same time, you know, the Biden administration influenced it. The Trump administration is influencing it. Politics in the Western Hemisphere, rivals being within our sphere of influence. It's something both sides agree on. Maybe the Biden administration was a little more uh, low key about it and a little less in the world political face of things. But you got to think both sides are looking at it. Both sides are seeing a threat there. Both sides are saying, okay, well, no, that shouldn't be a potential rival doing it. It should be the United States or Western countries or Western influence over those mines and infrastructure in Greenland, especially in the Arctic. I wish the Trump administration would have had a better PR campaign than screw all of you.
Whoever is running his PR, like, yeah, they're doing fine on social media as far as like the trolling. I'm a fan of the trolling to an extent. I mean, I
Hmm.
like, I just like some chaos here and there. But I mean, as far as I would be pointing stuff like that out as far as, hey, you guys were fine when it was when this was happening 3 years ago, or
Yeah.
what have you. There. Plus, he's just the being aggressive for the sake of being aggressive. Sometimes it seems like is what he's doing.
Yeah.
You've said it before. Whoever's running his PR team, they need to get rid of them because I don't
Yeah.
know what is going on there.
I don't know if it's like this weird art of the deal. I think I don't know what the art of what I think there's a general basis of the art of the deal of take a hard position on something and let people negotiate you down into something that you had originally deemed favorable, but that you wanted. It's just maybe you shouldn't be doing said art of the deal with allies, right? We can all agree Europe's been taking advantage of the United States, and we should have more influence over Greenland and in the Arctic regions, but kind of kicking down the front door isn't probably the best option for getting what you want. And
Well, it's also
we
probably not
we
the
could have,
best long-term option to.
yeah, for allies. So at the end of the day, it could have been some stuff behind the scenes, like, hey, look, you know what this is. I will give the Biden administration. I'm pretty sure they influenced the law banning that mining in Greenland. They probably influenced that behind the scenes through diplomatic efforts. Maybe that's the best scenario for those kind of things rather than attacking our allies. Do I think he should be twisting the arm of NATO for them to get their shit in gear and increase their defense spending? Absolutely. And by all means, attack them on that, threaten them, kind of scare them a little bit. The headlines, but behind the scenes, like, hey guys, you know what you need to do. Just kind of on the PR side, don't go pissing everybody off.
Yeah.
was
S-
scaring everybody.
So circle us back to Iran real quick. I actually just see this article right here. Saudi and Israeli officials visit Washington to discuss possible strikes on Iran. Senior defense and intelligence information from intelligence officials from Israel and Saudi Arabia visited Washington to discuss possible military action against Iran. General Shlomi Binder provided intelligence on potential targets in Iran during meetings with U.S. officials. Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman emphasized the need for diplomatic solutions to prevent a regional conflict. President Donald Trump warned Iran that a powerful U.S. naval force is heading to the region. Okay, so maybe it is Israel behind this. Maybe this is just
Mm.
a little side quest. You
Uh,
know,
I think it's going to happen. I follow a lot of intelligence sources on X, and we've moved a lot of hardware over there. THAAD systems, Patriot systems, AWACS.
now we sent a bunch of planes. I know we got the carriers,
And
the
these
Abraham
are
Lincoln.
like intelligence gathering planes, like the kind of stuff that paying attention to like cell phone calls, deep communications, targeting, stuff like that. You don't really move those kind of heavy hitting resources for to try to scare somebody.
Well, he's also, and again, this is listen, my rule of thumb when it comes to international engagements is if Lindsey Graham is for it, you should be against it in all likelihood. Um,
That's fair. That's
you
fair.
know, this is part of this has been going on. The Iran problem has been going on for. I mean, I remember in Trump's first term, I think it was John Bolton, or I think it was his name. He was
Yeah,
talking
that
about how
Warhawk.
he wanted to see American flags flying in Tehran and shit. So I think
Hmm.
that this is probably a continuation of that. I mean, I think it's one of those things that, hey, this, you know, this benefits Israel. It benefits us in a potential war with China. You know, you see, I mean, clearly the protests going on in Iran right now that have been going on for some time. That maybe this is the opportune time to do it. Again, I'm not necessarily against it as far as like from a humanitarian aspect and from a international potential future World War III aspect, but again, maybe Congress should have a say in this instead of just, well,
Yeah.
we're going to send over a strike group and see what happens.
To go back to your point of if it benefits Israel, look, you know what? After everything we've seen over the past year, and looking back in history of like Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to Congress about how Saddam Hussein was a threat and we need to take him out, and it seems like a lot of U.S. military operations in the Middle East were heavily influenced by Israel. Maybe they should sit this one out. Maybe, obviously, if they want to help militarily striking targets, if this were to happen, or if they need to defend themselves in some type of way, but they shouldn't be in the headlines of trying to come over and influencing the Trump administration to strike. Just after everything we've seen in Gaza and the negative influence or negative headlines that were out about them, and the stuff we've learned about them and everything they've done in the Middle East, I think they
Well,
should be sitting this one out.
the fact that they probably stole nuclear technology off of us, the fact that
Mhm.
the USS Liberty. I mean,
Yeah, a lot of stuff that
look at everything Israel's done over the years.
would
That
you necessarily call them an ally?
well, not just that, but I mean, imagine if any other country had done the things that they had done. Imagine if I forget what year it was when he was here talking in front of Congress and he was basically shit talking Obama. Imagine if Democrats were in charge of Congress and invited, I don't know, Keir Starmer over to talk shit about Trump in the halls of Congress. We would be rightfully having a conniption fit
Oh
over
yeah.
it. But Israel, it's a free pass. It's Israel. Oh, you mistakenly attacked our ship for 45 minutes or however long that was, even though they made multiple efforts to alert you to the fact that it was an American ship. Mistakes
Mm,
happen. It is water under the bridge. Right? Oh, you
mm.
probably stole
Oh, if
nuclear
I
tech.
was president during that, oh. I mistakenly bombed the shit out of all your military installations.
What a
Oops.
shame.
What a shame.
Thank God I didn't need
Did,
to get Congress's approval to do this.
did you try calling me and letting me know for 45 minutes? You probably should have called one more time.
Did you how well, I'm looking this up uh real quick just because I want to get my numbers right. The 75 minutes to 2 hours the battle lasted.
Mm.
With multiple attempts being made. Now, I listened to a whole podcast on it at one point in time. Like, the Israeli planes, it seems purposefully targeted their communications so that they couldn't call for help, which, you know, if you think it's an enemy ship, maybe that makes sense. But I guess like one of the things they did was the captain had the sailors pull out the parade flag, which is this massive flag, lay it out on the deck so it's like you could see from the air it was an American flag on deck, and like they were putting it out under gunfire and strafing runs, and it's like, all right, at what point do we maybe sit there and go, hey, guys, I think we got the wrong ship potentially.
Mm.
But yeah, it's like,
Hey, that's an American flag. Maybe we should stop shooting at it.
but has anybody called the American embassy? Let's find out what before we continue sinking this fucking thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like,
Which it didn't stink. So, kudos to American hardware at the time.
yeah, that well, fair. But I mean, when you think of all the things that they've done and all the problems they drop, I mean, another example, Libya from something I was reading recently. The whole Libya situation was heavily influenced by Israel. They wanted Gaddafi out of there. Obama basically was like, "Yep, okay, we'll go in and attack Libya." So that's one reason. Another reason I'm still like on the fence about this whole Iran thing is like, okay, is this one of those, let's reshape some geopolitical pieces, or is this just us being Israel's attack dog again?
Yeah, I think we should definitely have another separate episode about Israel and definitely kind of do a deep dive on that situation. But no, I completely agree. What's necessarily beneficial in MAGA, if we want to use those terms, is sending an armada to the Middle East and bombing Iran and regime change over there. MAGA.
Well,
At the end of the day.
I mean, my that was kind of my argument with the whole Venezuela thing. America first is like was taking Maduro in America's best interest. Now, sure, it didn't like negatively affect us. I mean, yeah, there was some positives out of it, but I mean, at the same time, it's like,
I think strategically, yes.
well, strategically, it did kind of make some sense. But my whole argument to it was, in the event of a war with China, it's like they're right there. We can easily blockade them. It's not going to be some complicated task like with Iran per se. I honestly, from a America first in a potential World War III scenario, to me it makes more sense for us to go after Iran because they're in China and Russia's backyard. Like it's easy for us to deal with Venezuela if shit hits the fan.
At the same time, I kind of hypothetically in a conflict with China and Iran acts out in their favor. Haven't we armed every other country in the Middle East to take care of Iran? Like, hey, look, you guys hold down the Middle East, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey. You guys can clearly handle that situation in the event of a war. The U.S. doesn't have to come over there.
Including the 200 U.S. military bases we've got surrounding them.
So, yeah.
I think America just likes to flex its military might from time to time as well. It's
every other month.
Yeah. Yeah. And like part of me, like for example, you had referenced the strikes we did with the bunker busters on their nuclear capabilities. I don't like nukes. I think that we should absolutely get rid of them. I'm perfectly, I can kind of rationalize it almost as like a greater good type of thing of, hey, we don't want another country having nukes. But again, to tie this to Israel, it's all but said out loud that Israel has nuclear weapons. why aren't we also leveraging them to get rid of theirs? I mean, if that's the
Yeah.
argument of like, well, we don't want a bad actor in the Middle East to have nukes. Well, Israel has attacked every country that borders it at one point or another. You know, and granted,
Yeah.
they're not in, 100% at fault. They've been attacked plenty of times as well. But there's been plenty of instances. I mean, look at the whole thing going on with Gaza. You know, they were attacking, what was it in the God, what's that country north of them that I'm thinking of? Lebanon. They were attacking targets in Lebanon. Battling over the border. They were attacking targets in Yemen and stuff. And it's like some of these groups, weren't necessarily attacking them first. Some of them were preemptive attacks. And it's like, sure, maybe you could argue that a preemptive attack was good in the long term thing. But it's like, well, you're attacking everybody around you and you've got the entire international community on your side. Maybe let's just tone it down a little bit, my guy. Are you really the victim when you're fighting multiple offensive wars and you've got the only global hyperpower in your corner,
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they still did annex parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria
I
from
mean,
that 12-day war. The
they,
Golan Heights and everything like that. Like, so.
Yeah, they still are.
Yeah, it's kind of like.
I mean, did you see recently there was another article I saw just, I think, like within the past couple of days that there was more skirmishes in some of those Palestinian towns in the West Bank where Israeli settlers were going in, burning down people's homes. And so it's like they're still doing all
But
this stuff
October
behind the
8th
scenes.
was so terrible, though.
Oh, 7th, you insensitive fuck.
Sorry.
You fucking anti-Semite.
This
was a terrible day. Proportionately, this was like 9/11s for them.
Yeah, but the fact that that's kind of something that their people do every other weekend whenever they get bored, right? Is they go into Palestinian towns or small towns, settlements in the outskirts, and just harass their villagers, burn down their houses, and chase them down, right?
It's one of those things
sure.
that's like, how do we? At what point, if like this is my whole argument, like somebody's.
I'm not anti-Israel, people. By the way, I just want to throw that out there. I'm just
I'm not. I'm anti-Zionist.
It's delicious.
I'm anti-Zionist. I'm not anti-Israel. I'm sure the people of Israel, for the most part, are great. But I mean, it's hard to deny that there is a large portion of Israeli population that is either a very hey, everybody is beneath of us. We are, everybody who's not Israeli is a second-class person. Or B, there's a large portion of the population that looks away and just doesn't even acknowledge that there's a portion of their population that does it.
Yeah.
I know that there was recently or not recently, but since the whole Palestine thing's been going on, they were having protests about bringing the hostages home. They were, there was some criticism of how the Israeli government was handling it and stuff, but it's like there's clearly a large enough section of your population that is okay with you attacking everybody around you and screwing over your allies. It's like, I'm not going to be anti-Israel, but it's like, hey, conversations need to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to kind of circle this back, has Ron Paul ever criticized Israel?
Again, I don't know.
And their military adventurism in the Middle East?
Again, I don't know offhand. I know he's very much, he's been very consistent. Libertarians typically are. I mean, when you look at it, he's like another Thomas Massey, so I'm sure he has either criticized them or he has, hey, I don't care what Israel does. I'm not in Israel. I'm an American. That's kind of one of his
I guess I
things.
kind of just did a quick Google search, and he said has argued that the U.S. should not provide foreign aid to Israel, stating that being a pro-Israel does not require funding its military with tax dollars. Okay,
well, I'm fine with you being pro-Israel. I'm not fine with you, hey, they're indiscriminately bombing children. Let's just look the other way because if we criticize them, that's anti-Israel. It's like, no, I can have two thoughts at once. I can sit there and say, Israel is a state, and at this point, the majority of people who live in Israel and Palestine alive today have had Israel. You know, it's been around that long. It's been around what 80 years at this point, something like that.
Yeah.
It's like the
What,
majority of
47?
the majority of people alive today have lived in a world with Israel. I'm fine with acknowledging that. I'm not fine with, hey, that means that Palestine has to be wiped off the map at the same time, and we need to get the U.S. involved in Iran, and we need to get the U.S. involved in Libya, and we need to get the U.S. involved in Syria, and we need to get the U.S. involved in Yemen, and we need to get the U.S. involved in Lebanon. You know, it's like I can keep going.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
doesn't make me that doesn't mean I'm against Israel. It's just a hey, we don't have to be. I don't want my tax dollars going to bombing children, and I don't want my tax dollars be my next generation of Americans being bogged down in another war in the Middle East.
Mm. Yeah. No, I just did a search, and it seems like most of his criticisms are financial aid and military aid to, he said they should become fiscally self-sufficient.
Well, again, well, did you see recently? Again, to your point, we do need to have a whole episode dedicated to Israel. But did you see?
Yeah, I think we definitely went there.
Yeah, this conversation's kind of taken a turn. But did you see Netanyahu recently? I think he was on some news network here, and he was talking about. I think he's seeing what's on the horizon, and how America is kind of changing its opinion on Israel because he's saying he wants
Well, look
to.
at me, I'm a Republican.
Well, yeah.
You know,
Well, and then a lot of Republicans are starting to change on that, and a lot of MAGA people are starting to change on that. But he had said something like he wants to see, I think, within the next decade, Israel not taking financial handouts from the United States again, or something like that, or by 2030 maybe, or something like that. I think he sees what's on the horizon.
oh yeah, no, like literally, for me, a lot of it was, I mind you, I used to be a conservative, and pro-Israel and Israel this and that, but over time my views have changed, and definitely this past summer, seeing a lot of the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza, and definitely save that perspective for a later podcast. But seeing a lot of that.
Spoilers: he was very pro bombing innocent children. He's a
Oh
terrible.
wow, canceled, immediately canceled.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
No, just seeing a lot of that, and a lot of the pictures, a lot of the TikToks, and their stance on everything, and
Well, it's not.
killing journalists. It's like, okay, very, very telling of who you truly are at the end of the day. And yeah, we'll definitely have to have a conversation about that. That we definitely do a deep dive into that.
Yeah. Well, just to
We'll save those controversial comments for another day.
Yeah. Just a real quick just to touch on what you brought up TikTok. One of the reasons TikTok got sold in the US is because Israel wanted it sold. Israel was a huge, because all the TikToks coming out of Gaza, it really, I think that really swayed a lot of the American populace. It was the first time, in Israel and Palestine's history, really, that the average person could see what the average person in Gaza was experiencing.
Yeah.
And Israel, I did not like that. They had a big say in the whole TikTok has to be shut down in the United States. I mean, there was that whole thing recently, I think last year, where Netanyahu was over here and he was touting that, TikTok's the biggest sale in American history and it's the most influential and consequential one. Well, yeah, because it swayed the American population on what Israel was actually doing.
Yeah. And I think I've already started seeing stuff like, again, I don't want to try to dig too deep into what they're doing, but at the same time, I've seen stuff like TikTok was like kind of pulling a Facebook in like 2020, and they were shadow banning a lot of negative information about Trump.
I've heard that. I haven't seen it. I did see that
and
there
it's like,
was.
okay, now that an American company's in kind of control, would we have seen a lot of the things we've seen going on in Gaza if that had taken place before or during, a lot of the bombings and stuff?
I don't think it would have. And I think part of that could be, there was an argument to be made about TikTok, that China controlled it, and
I mean, wow, a Chinese company providing free speech for Americans.
Well, maybe devil's advocate, maybe they were pushing some of that stuff up a little higher just to maybe sway the American population on Israel. Devil's advocate. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, listen, if my whole take on the whole TikTok thing was if your argument is it's about your security and your privacy, I thought as an American I have a right to choose where if I'm willing to take that risk that China gets my data, so be it. That's on me. That's my right. But B, how are you going to criticize a Chinese company when Mark Zuckerberg's doing the exact same thing?
Yeah.
I mean,
Or
there's
there's plenty of American companies that go a lot more in depth with taking your personal information than TikTok was, right? I mean,
absolutely that was
on a
kind of
daily
my
basis, Apple, Google, they
that was kind of
know
my whole
what you
thing
are.
was
Yeah.
that was kind of my whole thing was every you know every company has your information. Hell, I got a letter in the mail recently from Myers. It was a promotional thing about, oh hey, here's some coupons for things you frequently buy. Come on back. You haven't shopped here in a minute. It's like, I don't have an account with you. How do you know what I buy? You know, it's like you're fine with when American companies are stealing my data and selling it, but suddenly Chinese is where we draw the line, and it just so happens that it's 90% of Americans agree that TikTok's fine the way it is, but we're getting information that you can't control, so that's not good. We can't have that.
Yeah, you can't be influenced by the news entertainment industry.
Yeah, well, you don't have a say over what we're seeing on here. 'Cause keep in mind, I mean, the news entertainment industry. I mean, to circle that back to Israel, even, both sides have treated Israel very favorable in and conversely, Iran very negatively. Both sides have. It's something that's one of those things that the uniparty could agree on. So the news entertainment industry being owned by them allowed that we're just going to keep pushing this narrative. And then TikTok, people were seeing on the ground. It's like, well, wait a minute, that's not what I've been seeing on the news for 20 years. I
Mm.
didn't know people were living in these camps. I didn't know that Israel was purposefully, in all likelihood, targeting civilians and stuff.
Yeah, no, I did see here. Ron Paul, he pushed back against calls for the U.S. military support in regional conflicts, such as potential strikes on Iran, assessing that it is not the U.S.'s job to act as Israel's primary military proxy. Okay, fair point there, Ron Paul.
He
Fair point.
the libertarians, you can feel how you want about them. I know that they get there's a lot of negative connotation about them sometimes, but they're pretty consistent. I'll give them that. When it
Yeah,
comes to a foreign intervention and it comes to some money going to other countries, they're pretty down the middle, criticizing both sides.
yeah. I so to kind of circle this back about what we were originally talking about, the presidents having the freedom of striking. At the end of the day, are people like Rand Paul and others who have these opinions about supporting Israel and whatever military adventurism they choose to do in the Middle East, are both sides willing to pull that
Well,
ability from the president
well,
and
that's
saying, okay, well, we should declare war if we're going to protect an ally?
that's the problem, is that the Rand Pauls and I think Ro Khanna also sponsors the bill. He's a Democrat. I think he sponsored it in the House or something like that. I think him and Thomas Massie sponsored it in the House, and I think like Rand Paul sponsored it in the Senate. They just don't have the numbers, and when they do have support on it, it's just because the other party's in opposition. The only reason like Ro Khanna, for example, was on that bill was because it was against Trump. It wasn't because the Democrats are suddenly the party of peace and love. If the roles were reversed and they were if Biden had done it, they would have been fine, and Republicans would have been the ones that were trying to sponsor a War Powers Act and stuff. You know, so to your point is like the libertarians that have been pretty consistent on these issues. They just don't have enough numbers and enough people that are consistent with them to get rid of stuff like that.
Mm. That's fair. That's fair. But a lot of these people, there's a lot of influences behind the scenes. was it APAC and a lot of stuff like that, possibly influencing,
Well, not just APAC. I
members
mean,
of Congress behind the scenes, right? Like, hey, you sure about this?
well, it's not even just APAC. I mean, yeah, they play a big part when it comes to stuff like the Middle East. But I mean, think about the lobbying from Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon.
Yeah,
All these military industrial complexes that get their stocks go up when there's war. They're making money when there's war. If America's at peace, they're not making money. So hey, I got to influence a senator here or a congressman there to, hey, maybe we should strike Iran. Maybe you need more bunker busters. Maybe you need more artillery.
yeah.
Oh, hey, maybe you should be supporting Ukraine a little harder and give them more
Hmm.
weapons. That way
So
we can make more.
are you saying hypothetically, all these companies that are stock value might be going up potentially in the next month if said strike on Iran happens?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, it would depend
Yeah.
on the scale of the strike, I would say. The
Yeah.
thing with Iran is I don't think it's going to spiral into a. I think it would be more along the lines of what happened last time. We'd go in, we'd bomb some targets, maybe use some drone strikes on some top officials or something, and then get the hell out.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a boots on the ground. It's not going to be a long protracted thing. I think it's just going to be a quick.
Kidnap the supreme leader.
If he did that, at that point he's just collecting the Infinity Stones of foreign problem childs.
You know, we could criticize that, but how kind of epic would that be at the end of the day? Like, hey, we bombed the shit out of the I forget what that the controlling military faction or the
The IRGC, the Iranian
yeah.
Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Yep, bomb the shit out of them, and we kidnapped their supreme leader. He's
Listen,
now in New York City for trials.
it would be
He's right next to Maduro.
it would be hilarious at the end of the day. I mean, objectively speaking, it'd be like, wow, he did it twice. I mean, it's you gotta respect it at the end of the day.
Yeah,
I'm not for it, but it would be funny.
the Infinity Stones.
It's just he just goes around kidnapping foreign leaders.
Mm.
Well, on that note, I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Tune in next week. I think I want to do some more research, but I think if we're taking a vote here, I think unless something fucking crazy happens, another person sprays Ilhan Omar with vinegar. I don't know. My vote is an episode about streaming services and how you don't own anything.
Mm.
After that video
I
you
like
sent me
that.
and I watched it, I'd already had
You will
thoughts about it.
own nothing.
And you
and be
will
happy.
own nothing. You will like it, and you will pay for subscriptions on everything, including this podcast that all 3 people listen to.
Only $7.99.
For the low price of $7.99, you can bundle it for $8.99 with. We'll find some other company and we'll bundle it. Make it sound like it's a deal, but I think that'll be next week's episode, maybe.
Sounds pretty good.
On that note, from me, K, bye.
Remember, escape the echo chamber. I'm still working on that, by the way.
We'll get it narrowed down.
We'll get something.
I don't.
ChatGPT it. Okay, get something catchy.
Get some AI content in here. I like it. The way of the future.
Way of the future.
Okay, bye.
Bye.